Good day, everyone. Um, Welcome to this webinar. I do appreciate you being here. And uh, please, can someone confirm you can hear me? Can anyone hear me?
Yes,
All
yes,
right,
you're
all
very
right,
clear.
all right. Thank you very much. So, some of you might have heard about Quarto or probably used Quarto before. And if you've not, Quarto is simply a technical publishing system that allows you or anyone to create and publish both static and interactive documents, right? And these documents can include reports, dashboards, uh, interactive presentations, and so many more. And you can do this in a single format or several formats, such as HTML, PDF, Word documents, and every other format that Quarto supports. Um, the main reason why we're here is also to learn about parameterized reporting. So when we say parameterized reporting, how is it related to Quarto? So to actually give a very simple analysis about this, I can just say um, parameter reporting in Quarto, to be specific, is a report that can be customized to generate different versions of that particular report. Okay, using a specific set of parameters. For instance, if you intend to create a particular report, let's say a quarterly report for your organization. And to do this, what you can simply do is to initially create a parameterized report for the first quarter of the year and generate all the parameters based on the first quarter, the first report you created. You can extend this to other quarters of the year without having to build it from scratch. Like start from setting up your environment, your project, and the likes. And this is very, very important because it saves you a lot of time and stress also. So for this project, I'll be working with Gapminder datasets, which is from the Gapminder package in R. And I'm going to be working around the continent variable to be specific. I'm going to use this continent variable to create the report, and I'm going to work around the continent. So each report will be specific to a particular continent, and yeah, that is that. That's basically that on the introduction. So I'm going to move over to R Studios. Can anyone see my screen? So I know I'm actually sharing this properly.
Yes, your screen is very clear.
Yeah.
Continue.
Okay. Thank you very much. So right now I'm in a new project in R Studios. If you prefer another ID, maybe you prefer using um, what do we call VS Code, then I think there are specific settings that you have to go through for that particular ID. But for now, I'll be using R Studios for this particular project. To set this up, all you have to simply do is come over to the new project and click on this icon over here. After clicking on this, RStudio will generate this model for you to navigate through. Then you can scroll down to Quarto projects, click on it, then you can type in the name of your directory and create projects. I won't be creating another project because I created one already. So uh, that will, I will skip that part. Um, if you come over here, you will notice this particular code over here. So this particular code is a YAML code, and mainly it is majorly used for configuration. It performs the same specific tasks in Quarto also. So when you have a YAML header at the top of your document like this, it is mainly to configure all the particular settings for this particular Quarto document. In a situation where you have, let's say you have a larger project which requires multiple Quarto documents, at that point use you can use this underscore Quarto dot YML file. It's basically the same thing as I have here. So I can just remove this and basically remove this and use and include everything I want over here. But for this project, which is quite small, I will just continue with this document level settings. But in case you have a project whereby you have multiple QMD files and you want to give a general settings to all these documents, then you can simply put your configuration here. Okay. So I'm going to start by just going to include a banner over here. Everything's okay. Then the author, I'm just typing my name and the date. So for the date 2024, I can type in the date like this and render my output. Now, this has an advantage, it also has a disadvantage. The advantage in the sense that if you are only creating this report for a particular date and you don't intend to update the date all the time, then you can just simply add code the dates like this. But if you want to create this report on subsequent occasions, just like the parameterized reports that we'll be creating, I will suggest that you use the option last or the option last modified, right? As this will help you, it will help you render a new date whenever you make any changes to your document. It will render. Can you still see my screen?
Yes, it's very clear.
Okay. So whenever you make any changes in the document, maybe you made a change to the code or a particular configuration, then whenever you render this, you definitely have the latest date right here stored here. This is basically just a quick display of what I have done so far. Now I'm going to continue with my configuration. I'm going to add in the engine. Okay, I'm going to use since I'm working with R. I'm also going to add a format. By default, the format is HTML, but just to be explicit here, I'm just going to type it out. Then I'm going to add a table of contents so we can easily navigate through the report. Okay. Now, the first thing I'll be talking about is creating headers. In Quarto, you can create header by including the hash symbol. before a particular text. Okay. Now, there are several levels for creating headers. When you include a single um, hash symbol, then you are definitely creating a level one header. And we can keep on going down by including more hash symbol. So when I do this continuously all the way down to level 6, you can actually see the different set of headers. So while working on in a QMD document, you should be able to distinguish between these and while working in normal R script, because if you do this in normal R script, it's going to generate it's going to view this as a normal comment, but doing this in a QMD document will make it render as a level 1 header, level 2, or level 3 header. So if I come over here, you can actually see the different headers, and under my table of contents, you can actually see that the level 2 header is placed directly under the level 1 header. So back to our topic for today. I'm going to be creating a report on socio-economic indicator analysis for countries. Remember that I said I was going to create the parameter reports based on the continents based on the continents in the data. That's the gapminder data set. So I'll input the header right here. And when I render this, including the Asian text right here is not the way I'm going to do this, because I have to make this dynamic just in case I want to update it to a different continent. But we'll get to that later as we proceed. So I'm just going to create a section for my library. Okay. And I'm going to install libraries. And before I do this, I want to tell you about actually executing code in Quarto. Okay, to execute a code in Quarto, just like we've seen um, previously, to execute a code in Quarto, you have to include your code in a code block or a chunk, as it is called in R Markdown or Quarto. You need to put it in between these three backticks and make sure that you close them with another three backtick. If not, the code will run or it will return an error. For example, if I want to generate the current time, okay, I can include the code in between this particular block. And if I include the code right here and show you the way Quarto actually renders these two objects, it renders it differently because it assumes that this particular text right here is a markdown, while this one is an R code because we placed it in between the code block. And when I come over here, you can actually see the rendered. You can actually see the rendered output. You can actually see that the first code I wrote, which is in between the code block, generated this output, which is the current time, and the second one, which I wrote in plain pandoc area or markdown area, was rendered as a normal text. So you have to understand this so that you do not run into issues. And again, you have to make sure that you close your code block before rendering it. I'm just going to go ahead and include my packages or packages that I'm thinking. So now, right now, why the reason why I'm putting this right here is because I just want to indicate that these are the packages this particular report is using to actually generate the analysis. Normally, you wouldn't want to do this because whenever I click on the render button, it will always render this, it will always execute this code block. And to avoid this, we can simply create a code block level configuration or an executable configuration and set this to eval false. By default, eval is true. By default, eval is true. So whenever you set this to false, you make sure that this code block is not rendered or executed. Whenever Quarto is rendering all the code from top down, it avoids this particular cell. When you look at it, it just puts the code right in the output, but it does not render it. Unlike the previous code about the current time where it generated an output, but for this one, it did not generate any output. So I can go ahead and import. So it's always a good practice for you to run a code before rendering it, okay? Because there are certain times codes like this generates error, and you can actually avoid rendering and you can actually avoid rendering the code if it actually generates an error beforehand, so you can take care of the error. So I'm just going to render this particular error here. Just to make sure that everything is working fine. You can actually look at the log over here. It shows the rendering process that is currently going on. So when we look at this, you can see that it's actually renders our library import. But this is definitely not what you might want. This is standard tidyverse stuff, and it's probably not something you might want to include in your final output. So what you have to do right now is to add more executable configuration, and I'm going to say warning. I'm going to set this to false. By default, it is true, and I'm also going to say messages. I'm going to set this to false also. So I'm going to re-render it, and you are going to see that the output has actually the output of the library importing libraries has actually been updated, and we no longer have the warnings and messages anymore. I'm going to go over to my data processing step. And right here I'm going to actually filter the data. This is the gapminder data set. And I'm going to use the filter function from the dplyr library. The continent, the Asia. Since we are working with the Asian continent, so I'm just going to render this so I can actually see how the code is. Okay, yeah, it's working fine. So I'll remove this consonant variable because it is only a single value. You can actually have the set of records under the Asia continent. I'm going to assign this to consonant here, so we can actually use it in other code cells. So I'm going to run this. Yeah. So I would like to tell you something about creating callout blocks. So why you can create a callout block in order to attract the attention of of your readers, right? So to do this, you simply have to include a pandoc div, and these divs help you to include CSS classes and also IDs that you can access in your CSS file or JavaScript file. It is important that you include the 3 colons at the beginning of the block and another set of 3 colons at the end to signify that this is the end of the find of the. Now I'm going to initially create a custom div and a custom CSS callout block just to show you how you can use external CSS. By the way, Bootstrap comes with Quarto by default, and that is what I'll be using here. If you are familiar with CSS, you will know that there are actually classes in the CSS library that you can utilize in your documents whenever you want. And to do this, I'll just type that is, I'm going to include change the background primary, then I'm going to change the text to white, then also going to add the padding, then I'm going to add the margin also, and just to make sure that the actual div is rounded on the edges. I'm just going to add this too, and you can also add an ID, like I stated before. I'm going to add a callout ID. Okay, so when I render this, you can actually see that it creates a new block, And in this particular block, it changes the background to blue and make sure that the text, that is this text that you can see within this class, to white. And also it adds a padding of 3 and the margin also, and makes the border around it. So when we come over here, you can actually see that, the output generated. While working, it is important to always include a full stop, to call it like that, before a particular class. While using this, um, it is important because whenever you remove this and you render it this way, it generates an error, unfortunately. So you have to include the dots. While working in other programs, you don't necessarily have to include the dot before the name of the class. But working with a pandoc div, just like this one, you have to include the full stop before the actual class. Now you don't need to know Bootstrap in order to use a callout block. You can actually use the built-in callout block class from boot from Quarto, and what you have to do is write the text, write the class callout, and second text that will include it. So make things quick. And I'm going to include the title called let's see, data summary. Yeah. So when I render this, you can actually see the default view of the normal Quarto callout block. Now this is mainly to get the attention of your readers or your users, because it is important that they actually see things like this, because probably the information included in this kind of div or environment is quite important for them. So you have to always make sure that it is different from the general output of your report. And there are other ways to actually do, and one way is to include the notes, to append the notes to the callouts. So when I render this, you can actually see that there is an improvement from the previous default setting. Now we have an icon that actually indicates an information, and it changes the color to blue from the default gray it was. This is just a particular one. You can also add other types of callouts. Remember, don't forget to include the dots. And let me just say this should be just list Asia. Okay. And I'm going to include the food blog here. I'm going to say, I'm just going to grab the, I'm going to grab all the countries in this filtered data set. There's all the countries in Asia. Let me just run this so I know that the code is actually working. No, no, no. Yeah, yeah, right. Now, exactly. I'm going to render this and show you what the output would look like. And here it is. Looking at the output right now, you notice that we have a lot of information in our output. What we can simply do is to um, what we can simply do is to add a setting which should be collab, collab the output is going to be collage true. And when I render this, you can actually see that we can toggle between showing the output and not showing the output, which is actually great if you are trying to actually manage space within your document. So one other thing, again, just before we move over to the next stage is right now we have included the word Asia so many times in our output. And the major aim is to create a parameterized document, which is a report right now. And what we can do here in order to make it dynamic is to add the param keyword. And right here, we can say continent name. And I'm just going to give it Asia. Okay. Now, to access um, this continent name, you have to include the word param, then the continent name. It's just like working with a list, accessing a value from a list. And we can actually change the names of the values here. Right now, we have Asia, which is hard coded. We can make this dynamic by using something we call a an inline code, right? And to create an inline code, what we simply have to do is type a backtick, then immediately followed by an R letter. Then we can close it with another backtick, which we have uh, right here. And I'm just going to show you how it works. So I'm going to say the current time is time. I'm going to show you how it works. And when we include this, you can see that it actually renders this code that we have here because I included it in an inline code, right? We can actually see the value right in our output over here. So with this information, with this knowledge now that we have, we can go ahead and change the hard-coded values that we've done so far. And what we can simply do is to, just like we did here, in order to access the value, that is this value, can simply replace all the hard-coded values. I have this right here, and I have this right there, and render the output one more time. When we do this, we can actually see that we have the value Asia here. We also have the value Asia over here, and we can see that our filtered data is actually generating only countries that falls under the Asia continent. We can do the same for our summary over here. Right now, the summary is quite hard-coded. We have the version, uh, recently changed this. We also have the number of unique countries, which is in reference to the country, to the continent, sorry, Asia. And we also have the um, year the data started from and the year the record ended. To do this, we are simply going to use the same inline code that we've done. And to do this, let me just show you how to extract the version of the package over here. So you can say package version, okay, and I'm just going to type in gap minder. And when we do this, we can see the generated package version. So we can simply replace the previous value we had here with this new value. So whenever we update the gapminder package, we will see the updated version right in the report over here. And we can do the same for the number of countries. All we have to do is grab the total number of unique countries in Asia. So I'm going to do this, then unique, then we're going to bring in value. Just to show you what's going on right now. You can actually see that we have the 33 countries, the 33 unique countries. And we can change this since it represents the variable in the data set. We can simply change this to and also you can also use the column names. All right, yeah, I'm just going to use the name, the continent here. And for this, I'm going to grab the minimum here. Just in case the data is updated in future, we don't want to have an outdated code and an outdated output also. So what we can simply do here is to add a code that extracts the minimum here. I'm going to copy it here. And another code that extracts the maximum here. So to see what we have so far, I'm going to render the output. And there you have it. We have the version which we included here. We also have the name of the continent, the unique country, the year, and the maximum year. We can see the parameter settings in action by actually changing the value here. So if I change this to Europe, you can actually see that it updates all the values pertaining to the filtered parameter to Europe. So we have Europe in the first header title. We also have Europe in our data summary. And when we click on this colored block, we can actually see that it is only countries in Europe that are included in our output. Before we move on, I would like to show you how to avoid including a code block, just in case you have a sensitive code that you do not want to include in the output. What you can simply do is to add a particular configuration, which is echo, and I'm going to use the value false. Now, by default, echo is true, which includes the code in the output. But when I set it to false, it actually removes the code, but it doesn't, Quarto does not also remove the output. It only removes the code and leaves the output. When I come back here and I click on this, you can actually see that the code is no longer part of the final output, but we can still see the output generated by the unique country code. So I'm going to continue using the continent Asia because that is the continents that we're working with. Okay. I just want to ask so far, does anyone have a question they would like to ask? If you have a question you would like to ask, does anyone have a question? Okay, there is no question. I'm just going to move on. The next thing we talk about is code annotation. So when we say code annotation, it is simply a way of adding comments to your code. Not necessarily the normal way we do add comments to our code. Just in case you have a comment that is too big to be included by the side of the code, what you can do is you can take advantage of the code annotation in Quarto. And to do this, you can simply let me grab the code right here. And what this code is doing right now is it is actually extracting the average life expectancy from each country. And to include a code annotation right here, I'm simply going to include a special kind of comment where I will include an ID, the code ID. Where did I make this? Three. I'm also going to make this three. Finally, I'm going to make this four. So what we're simply doing here is that we are actually including like a reference to these particular comments right here. That is exactly what we are doing. For the first one, which is the first line, we're simply grabbing the filtered continents data frame. And the second one, we are grouping by the country. And the third code right here, we are simply summarizing the grouped data frame to extract the average life expectancy. And the last code right here, we are just sorting and arranging the data frame by the um, average life expectancy that we summarize in descending order. So we're actually going to get the countries with the highest life expectancy down to those with the lowest. And when I come over here, you can actually see the output in this report. And we can make further updates on the code annotation, right? We don't have to use the default value. Well, we can simply change this to over. And when we render this, previously we had the values right here underneath the code. But right now, after changing it to over, but whenever we over this particular code tag, we are going to see a tooltip that displays the information about the code. Now, the way I created it here, it does not necessarily have to be for each particular line. You can add multiple line code annotation also. All you have to do is make sure that you give it the same ID right here. So we are including 333. So this particular code belongs to the third summary over here. So whenever we render it and we check the output, you can always see that everything here is selected, which is very useful when working with a large amount of comments. Um, I'm also going to talk about tables in Quarto. There are several ways you can include tables in Quarto. Some of them are using a normal markdown table. You can also include a table from the need-R package and also use a third-party package. To do this, I'm going to use the feature tab set panel. And again, I'm going to use a pandoc div to create this. What I'm simply going to do is I'm going to give it a class of panel, okay? And each tab set, each tab can be created using a second level header. So I'm going to give this markdown. Also going to add a second tab, which will be the one for the meter table, and finally a third-party package. Now, working with Markdown can be quite easy if you've done something like this before. And if you've not, what you can simply do is to add a set of pipe. So what I have here, I have a pipe here that says country. I also have a pipe here that says year. Then I have another pipe to separate each column and I'm going to say GDP per capita. I'm going to include a final 5 here. And just to indicate that the first rule is actually the column, I'm going to include dash all round. I'm just going to play around this just for you to see how it actually works. And say 8,470. I'm going to close it right here. So this is a normal markdown table. This is how to create a normal markdown table. Is not all you have to do is include pipes and dashes around the text to separate the but it kind of visualizes a table if you look at it properly. But for our use case, I'm going to actually write a code. I'm going to actually write a code that returns the country with the highest GDP per capita. And you can simply type this out directly, but at the end of the day, it defeats the whole essence of the parameterized report. So in order to resolve this, we can simply assign this to, we can simply give this variable name and access the values over here. The country, just to make sure everything is well aligned. Okay. And I'm also going to grab the year again, realign the column, and finally, I'm going to add the GDP per capita. Yeah, and GDP. I'm going to format this, and finally, I'm going to realign just for visual purpose. Quarto knows how to render it. But the most important thing is you have to actually include the pipes and the dashes in their expected position. So to check the final output here, we can actually see the tabs we created earlier, and also for the markdown, we can see the generated table that we created. We can also give this a caption just to make sure that whoever is looking at the table can actually understand what the table represents. And we can say country GDP per capita right there. When we do this, a caption will be included underneath the table directly to describe what the table is actually referring to. You can come over here and work with the neat archive. This is actually much easier. You can imagine you have a row of 50 records or probably 70, 80, and at coding it like this would probably not be efficient. To actually make things easier, we can simply use the package. Yeah. When you come over here and just you can actually see a list of values you can include right here. So I'm going to grab a data frame that summarizes the top 5 countries with the highest GDP per capita. And I'm going to pass it directly to the table function. Just to random it. You can actually see what it looks like. There you have, which is much more faster and better than the Markdown. There are certain use cases where you would want to use Markdown, and there are other cases where you might not necessarily want to use Markdown, especially in situations like this where you have a large uh, amount of rows. I'm also going to add a caption here. I'm going to say top 5 countries with a GDP per capita. And it does the same thing as what was done here with the Markdown output. When we come over here, we can actually see the caption right underneath the table also. There are several third-party table columns that you can use. This is not, you don't necessarily have to use the Git package. There are other packages like Reactable and DT and so many more that you can actually use to generate tables in Quarto. So let me just take this and also going to be working on top 5 and pass it to the GT function. And when I render this, you can actually see the difference between the GT and the previous column tables, sorry, that we created. We have the background, then finally we have the GT table. We can give it more configuration just to make sure that the table is not actually congested. What we can simply do is we can add the tab function and simply add a table with, I'm going to use the value 600. We can also take care of the number over here and make it well formatted. To do that, we're going to use the format number and just give it the column name that we want to format, which is the GDP per capita. So I'm going to re-render this again. I think what we actually have so far. Yes, so it is much more aligned than and well formatted than it was before. So just like we added the caption, we can also add another one to the GT table. And to do this, we can use the inline configuration for a code block and simply type TBL and cap. I'm just going to copy the same analysis we are performing here. Okay. And there you have it. You actually have the caption underneath the table also, just like we have for the table and also the markdown. Now this is just the basic way of using table in Quarto. There are other more advanced ways of using tables in Quarto. Now finally, I'm just going to walk through how to use or how to include charts in Quarto also, and also include some additional features that you can use to improve um, the accessibility. The first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to um, create an analysis that extracts the average population by year. Just to see what we have here. This will run this up. Yeah. All right. As you can see, we have generated the output right here. And if we render this, you can actually see how Quarto treats charts differently from the way it treats table. Okay. We're going to wait for it to render. Okay. And yeah. So if you look at this close properly, you're going to see that it is not actually centered. It is aligned to the left hand side of the report, and it does not take the full width of the particular container it's actually in. And we can actually rectify this by including some set of configuration. Just like we did for the table, we can also do the same for the chart output. And to do that, we are simply going to include the as the fig width. Okay, let's give this an 8. Figure I. I'm going to make it half of the width, and I'm just going to align this to the center. So again, when we come over here, you can actually see the updated output. While working with that, it is important that viewers can actually see what the chart is actually trying to, the message the chart is actually trying to convey. Not necessarily having to, yeah, okay, yeah. So we can actually see the final output over here, and we can see that right now it is now aligned to the center, and it takes almost the full width of the particular container it is in. And also we have reduced the, and also the height has been reduced. I can also add a caption, just like I did for the tables above, and I'm going to say the average population by year. One other thing is that we can actually change the location of the caption. We can include it at the top of the chart, the bottom, which is the default, or we can also include it on the margin. You don't necessarily have to include it at the bottom of the chart. If you would like to include it at the top, you can include it at the top. And if you would like to include it at the margin, which is always free, depending on the kind of output you're actually creating. For this particular output, you can see that the margin is free, so we can actually add any elements, any chart, any table that we want to add right in the margin. But for this, I'm just going to add the caption just to show you that you can also include things on the in the margin. If we go forward and add a label, yeah, to add a label for reference. So I'm going to say serial, then for plot. Now, in order to reference a particular plot or table or a particular object in Quarto, what you can simply do is include a label as part of the configuration and type in a particular value, which will be the ID in order to the ID to reference. Now we can reference this particular plot we created anywhere in the document. All we simply have to do is you can actually see how the reference works when it is being added to the output. The reference is particularly useful just in case you have a output that needs more clarification. What you can simply do is add a reference to that particular output that needs to be referenced. Then you can actually see that we have this popover that actually shows what the output is. You don't necessarily have to add it right here. I just included it here for visualization purpose. You can add it anywhere in the document. You can add it at the top of the document or at the end of the document. And before we finally move on, I'm just going to show you one last feature, um, which is actually called particular feature. You can call this. There's a particular feature that allows you to zoom in on any output you want, and it is called the light box. I'm going to set the value to true. And when I render this, you can actually see that um, whenever whenever I click on this particular image, I can zoom in to get more details, just in case the original value isn't large enough. Maybe we have a couple of charts over here. We can actually include the light box over here. I'm going to re-render it again. Probably work. Okay, yeah. This is what happens when you click on the chart. It can be a table or any other output generated by Quarto. What you simply have to do is click on it, then you can get more details. As you can see, it's also included the caption we added. And before we actually render our report for the other continents, let me just show you something on working with very tight spaces in Quarto. I'm going to include two charts side by side, so you can actually see positivity. You can actually see um, a situation where you might not necessarily have enough room to accurately include your charts. I'm just going to run this right here also. So you can actually see what the output would look like. This is the output. As you can see, we have the GDP per capita for the selected years, and we also have the average GDP for each country in the selected continent. And when we come over here, we Quarto actually separates the code. It actually puts each output in a particular code cell and generates the output for that code, then does the same thing for the next code. But what we can simply do is to include a layout um, n colon. So I'm going to give it to just so that we have each plot displayed side by side. Then n rows, I'm just going to give it one since we only need one row for this particular output. When I render it again, you can see that we have our two charts side by side, but then it is very hard to it's very hard to view the labels on the y-axis, especially for average GDP per capita for each country chart. And generally, the chart is not very visible. One thing we can do is we can either add a light box to zoom in, or we can work with the column settings in Quarto, which allows us to increase the amount of space we assign to the output. And the screen insert shaded. And if I go back, you can actually see that there are so many. You can actually see that there are so many options for you to work with. And when you look at this, you can see that the output has actually increased in size. So like the previous one where it squashed everything in between this particular um, container. So now the output is free to display the values properly, and we actually have more space to work. It actually has more space to work with. We can actually work or configure our chart by including this 18. Okay. We don't necessarily need to display this, so I'm going to add the configuration setting that says code food. By default, it is false, so I'm just going to make it true. And I'm going to add a code summary that says G plus 2 in reset over here. When I render this, you visualize that you can see that we have a different output, and Right now, we have our team right here, and it doesn't really affect any other code except for the charts that we have. And you can simply hide this code however you want to. This is just one of the features of Quarto that you should be aware of when working on your report. Now we've worked with the Asian continent. We can also generate output for other continents. And to do this, we can easily use the Quarto package. I'm just going to create a new script with right here. And you can simply install the Quarto package if you don't have it. I'm going to load it in order for me to access the function. That is the render the Quarto render function. Yeah. I'm going to say input. For the input, is going to be the documents that you are working on, which is the start, uh, with what is the MB, and then just do this right here. It's easier for me to work with. And the output format, which we indicated over here as HTML, you can also indicate it here also. If you remember, I said you can also create multiple outputs with Quarto. So just in case you want to convert this to a PDF document, you can simply indicate PDF over here. Of course, there are several features and there are several features that won't work with PDF right here. So you have to be very careful when converting from one output from one format to another. And we can say execute that would be output file. And this output file is actually the name of the file you want to render the document to. So I'm going to say Asia, or let's do another one for Europe, Europe, for dot HTML. Do not forget to include the file extension. Then finally the execute param. I'm going to pass a list of values. In our case, we only have a single parameter, which is the continent name. So I'm just going to pass the continent in. In another situation whereby you have multiple parameters, you can always include more parameters. If you're actually working with the year, you can include the year. 2007, you can include as many parameters as you want over here. And the number of parameters you include here, you must also pass them into this list. Now, when I click on the render, when I run this code, it actually generates a report for the Europe continent. Remember that we have been working with the Asian continent. We can actually generate another report for the Europe continent. And not only the Europe continent, we can also generate reports for other continents in our data set. Right now, you can see that we have the Europe continent report. We can do something similar for the African continent. It's the same thing. All you have to do is change the name of the output file and the parameter itself. You can render this. And view the generated output. View it on the browser here. And there you have it. The output for countries in Africa. Now you can do the same for the rest of the continent in the data set. All you simply have to do is change the parameter, which is the continent name, right here in the execute parameter list. There are situations maybe where you have a bigger project and which requires multiple parameters. You don't necessarily have to write each function or render it each parameter report one after the time. You can easily use a loop, or you can create a function and simply just pass the name of the continent or the parameter that you want to create. And Quarto is simply just going to render the output for you the way you have generated it in the initial report. And you can also render this on a terminal, just in case you are actually working from another program. You can actually render this on a terminal also. To keep things simple, I won't do that, but you can also render this in a terminal. You can render this whenever you save the document. There are so many options available for you. You can always go through the documentation and see more features that are available to you while using Quarto. What I have done here is limited. It's just some of the features that I find very useful to me and that I use constantly, of course. And so that's that. Does anybody have any question so far? Can anyone hear me? Does anyone have any question?
Sure, we can hear you.
All right.
Do you guys have any
So,
question?
Yeah, I do, right? Hi, thank you for that wonderful tutorial. It was very insightful. I must confess, it looks a bit advanced, but it's okay. And I think you're also kind of not carrying us along. But yeah, we can always go back to the recording and rewatch and just go through it one more time. Maybe by then, or the cool concept we just settle in. So I just have like a question. Your day-to-day workflow, how
right.
do you incorporate this that you are showing us today? Is it that while the report is done, do you mail it out, or how do you use the final awesomeness of Quarto in your day-to-day work pipeline? I don't know if you can share that with us. Thanks.
All right. Using Quarto in my day-to-day pipeline. Well, uh, Quarto is quite extensive. Okay. And majorly when I use Quarto, I'm usually creating a kind of summarized report, either for myself as just a side project or for a particular client. And one thing I have noticed is that you have to be consistent in the way you actually create your report, because there are certain cases whereby this particular output will work for a particular set of values, probably a data sets that you have. And when this data set is updated, um, you simply have to come back to your generated output and make sure that each and every variable and values that have been generated are consistent with what you actually have in your code. Because if you don't do a validation on the output, you might actually be sending out the wrong information. So it is very important. That is one of the most important thing I used to do, especially when it comes to generating parameterized reports. Because definitely you are just automating the report generation in a certain way. So you have to make sure that you are validating the output constantly. And one more thing is that I do use GitHub Actions. Yeah, I use GitHub Actions to actually simplify things for me. So whenever I update the code right here on my local system, I just send it to GitHub and everything works the way it's expected to work. I don't know if that has answered the question.
Yeah, partly. Yes. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, Baba, today. It was really, really insightful. Yeah, really appreciate your effort, and for as many that came to today's session, we really, really, really appreciate. Um, yeah, so thanks, Baba, to us again. So, of course, we're going to share the um, GitHub repository and also the recordings for as many
Yeah,
that missed. Yeah, hopefully.
I
Uh,
will do
Okay, no problem. Yeah, so I really want to appreciate you guys, and I want you guys to also look out for the next meeting, and yeah, and we'll surely keep up with you guys for the info. And I really want to appreciate you guys, and yeah, we have come to the end of our session today, and yeah, you guys should go back even when we share the link. Just you guys should just go back and review it, and of course practice make perfect. So you guys should practice and know. Yeah, thank you very much, Baba. Today we really appreciate you coming and teaching us and exposing us to the world of Quarto. Yeah, thank you very much, and you guys should have a
that.
nice day. Yeah, Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Good morning.
Okay.